a little bit like the two speakers earlier, I sort of came across this understanding. I've been a coach for 15 years. I started in about 2000. I was sort of in my late 20s. And previous to that, I did a law degree, which was all very nice, but it wasn't that interesting apart from the people side. And then I went into working in innovation and sales for big organisations. I was lucky enough to be sponsored by Diageo, United Distillers as they were then, and then I went into innovation consulting. And the thing that I found fascinating when I was in innovation consulting was how we come up with all these great ideas as consultants, and then the organisation would somehow mess them up. Or get risk averse and not launch them, even though the consumers had said we'd really like it. So I got fascinated by why organisations didn't work, and I'd always been fascinated by people. And I'd done a little bit of counselling before. I delved into counselling a bit. It wasn't really for me. It was a little bit too past. And then I came across coaching and NLP. This is about in 2000. And I thought, wow, this is what I want to do. So I trained in NLP and I trained in coaching. Coaching was quite early in those days, 15 years ago. But it's what I wanted to do. So I trained in that. And I went for sort of 10 years picking up loads of tools and techniques, like we were saying earlier. So, I was a big NLPer. I was an NLP practitioner, master practitioner, trainer, EFTer, clean language, embodied modelling, appreciative inquiry, all these things to help people really have fresh thinking. That's all I was doing. I didn't know at the time. I thought it was I was a hypnotherapist. I thought it was my wonderful technique. I thought it was me who was doing it. But it was a little bit hit and miss. Some people would, it would work really well, and some people it wouldn't. All those things you've heard before. And then in 2010, I got a glimpse of the principles. I'd known Michael Neal, who you heard referenced earlier, who wrote the book Inside Out Revolution. I'd known him since 2003 because he's one of my NLP mentors. And when I heard him talk about thought a bit more than he normally does. And I was like, well, why does he keep talking about thought? And in a slightly wrong way, I heard him talk about it. And then he very politely pointed out, no, it was the right way. So I got a glimpse of the principles. I worked with Michael a lot, sort of 2011, started to see it a bit more, and then went on the Three Principles Institute. And slowly but surely, my thick head started to unlearn a lot of the stuff that it had learnt. And I saw, wow, this is the bit that had kind of been missing, I suppose. It helped me understand how come what I was doing with my NLP and coaching was working, because it was working, it was quite successful, but how come it wasn't when it wasn't? And more importantly, how come I didn't need it anymore? Not that it's bad at all. It can be very powerful. But I knew I wanted to have a different kind of conversations with my clients now. I wanted to be pointing them, as Ian was saying earlier, upstream. Because it felt like, when I'd got an understanding of the principles, that if I was doing a tool or technique, I was slightly cheating them, because I wasn't really showing them the real thing. I was giving them a bit of something down here. And actually, there's a much more powerful conversation. Now, that became fairly easy and obvious to me in my private client work. So as a coach, I work with private clients, and I work with businesses and organisations. And I love the variety of that. And I do a lot of coach training as well. So I do a lot of coaching skills training, leadership training. It became fairly easy for me in private client to have that conversation. There was an interesting kind of 6 months where I would probably, in a session, be 80% my old stuff, 20% about the principles, and then it went sort of 50-50. Then it went 80% principles, chuck a technique in at the end, just to make sure they've got the value for money, because, but pretty soon I was what I would call sort of more pure. And the nature of the transformation that the clients were getting was in a different order to what I'd been getting with my NLP. They would say things like, this resonates at a cellular level. This is something I will take to my grave. I can't unsee this now. And it's that transformation word which gets used a lot. But you go for a valve point where you can't really see the world the same again. Now, in moments you can fall asleep and awake to that, right? But where you bounce back to changes. Now that is what, I was getting great results with my stuff anyway, but that was just so powerful. And for me, it was powerful too. But to be honest, I had a little bit more thinking around that in business. A little bit more thinking around, how do I take this to a business? I knew from my experience in business that it was absolutely what they're looking for or need. Because what a business is looking for? Well, we'd like to have a competitive advantage. We'd like to do more with less. We'd like to increase the well-being of our staff. We'd like them to want to come to work more. We would like them to have more sense of purpose. We'd like to have more fun. We'd like to connect with our customers. We'd like to be innovative. Change is a constant now. And they're doing lots of things to try and help that. And I could see, wow, there's a bit here that you need to have a look at, which you've innocently missed. But to start with, it was a little bit difficult to go and have that conversation because it felt like this was quite an abstract thing. Because fundamentally, we're talking about 3 psycho-spiritual principles. I remember one guy saying, one business owner said, do not mention the word spiritual. Banned. I was like, but we are spiritual. Anyway, so I played over a couple of years with how to talk to organisations about it. And one of the ways I did it, I was running a big coaching skills program, manager or leader as coach, in a big local authority. And I developed over about 6 years a lovely little 2-day coaching skills course, which packed full of models, T-grows and logical levels and questioning things and options and goal setting, all the things you're probably as coaches very familiar with. Great 2 days, even if I do say so myself. You get great feedback, but I thought, well, I'd already committed to this program for the sort of, I couldn't change it completely, although in my mind I wanted just to change it completely. But I put in an hour and a half about the principles at the end of day 1. Right, so they're getting all these tools and techniques, all these wonderful things. And at the end of the 2 days, I'd go around and ask people, we'd go around and say, well, what was the most useful or fascinating thing? And these are people, bear in mind, who have been sort of sent on the course because their boss, and so go on that course. Oh, okay, we'll go on the course. So they weren't possibly the most open mind, and not necessarily useful, the cutting edge of leadership development, or some of it was in a local authority. And I'm generalising a little bit. You know what I mean, right? They probably hadn't had training for the last 5 years. Why do I go on this course? CEO says go on this course. So I'll go out at the end and say, what was the most useful thing? And there was a lot of great stuff in that course, to be fair. But about probably, we did this quite a few hundred people, about 15-20% would go, that stuff you talked about yesterday, what did you call it again? The thought stuff. Now that's fascinating. Now the other 80% were going, oh, I love that tool for, how to have a conversation, the T-grow. But for me, even with just an hour and a half, getting 15-20% of people going, that stuff, that just reassured to me that this is absolutely the direction I wanted to go in. But the trouble is, I've been selling it in something different, so then I needed to decide I want to just sell this in a very pure way. And the other thing that happened, I had 18 months in Australia. I just went there with my family. My in-laws are all from there, my wife, and we just went there. And for me, that was an experience to go, right, I want a clean sheet. I want to go and try this stuff, because everyone knew me for my NLP or my whatever. So as soon as I go and talk to them, they go, oh, this is NLP, Piers. I go, no, it's not. Sounds like it. No, it's not. Right? So one of the reasons for going to Australia, apart from the fact the sunshine, was to go and just with a blank piece of paper. And I went to an area of Australia where it wasn't the big city. It was called the Sunshine Coast, just up from Brisbane in Queensland. So people aren't looking for the newest thing there, but they're definitely human beings. But they're quite say it as they see it. So I knew I'd get some honest feedback, right? Don't take much messing. And I was working with a business and construction. They did construction. And the owner of the business, it was a small business, probably about 100 people. I'd done some one-on-one coaching, and he'd really seen these principles, and he thought, wow, that's powerful. He said, can you come and take some of my guys through it? He said, but I'm a bit concerned, because some of them are quite, well, they've come up on the tools, And there was a guy there they called Swampy, right? And he did their dredging. He would go out and live in Wagga Wagga or whatever for 6 months and just run the projects out in the middle of nowhere. He was a real Aussie bloke. And we were going through this stuff, and I remember for the first day, he was just staring at me. What are you on about, right? And he used to keep going out for a smoko, And on day 2 morning, I don't know what happened to him, but there was a glint behind the eye, and he goes, I get it. And his colleagues turn around and go, well, if he gets it, right, you know. But it just showed me that this is universal. And I'd been told that by many of my mentors. This is universal, this is human, everyone can see this. But it wasn't until I'd worked with a whole range of people and businesses that I thought, this is it. So it took me a while to get there, is what I'm trying to say. Okay? Because I had quite an intellect on me. I'm lucky enough to be quite well educated. But I've been too academically, you know, I did law at university. This is the opposite of learning the law. This is not information out there that comes in here. This is the other way around. Spiritual for me was a bit, I don't know about that. Maybe I'll go on a spiritual journey one day. But now I just see it's just what's there. I just, you know, all that's dropped. So after playing with this for a while, I was like, okay, this has massively helped me. This can help anyone. And actually, I want to play with it in business. So that's sort of my journey with this.